replacing the front brakes on your 4th gen Maxima. Obviously the wheel's off, if you couldn't tell. I'm not going to cover jacking up and moving the wheel, because if you can't do that, you really shouldn't be doing brakes. It's my personal opinion. You can see my jacking point here. It's a little better. Shitty lighting in the garage. I like to jack up there. It's a really nice low point. You can get the car up pretty high. Yes, I trust my jack stands, but I like to leave the jack on there just in case. So you never really know. Now, easiest if you just turn the whole hub like this, just angled out, so you can get to these bolts back here easier. And yes, I'm wearing gloves. This nitrile crap isn't out of my good ones. It's because everything in here is covered with you can't, they're black gloves, but everything in here is covered in grease from a bad axle boot. So yeah, I'm gonna replace that, or the seal, and make a video about that. It's going to be covering removing the rotor as well. Otherwise, you could just remove one of these bolts and tip the caliper up, and there you go. But to remove this clip up here, you just got to make sure you don't lose the damn thing. So pop the brake line out of there. Then caliper is held onto the torque member, or caliper bracket, whatever the hell you want to call it. The 14mm head bolts. So you just want to go ahead and remove those. Remember, the bolts are facing away from you, so you don't want to tighten them by accident. Also, there are a lot of little sharp things around here, so you want to make sure to not slam into anything that will cut you. Go ahead and loosen those two, pop them out. Put those aside. Yank off your caliper now. This is why I removed the brake line from the bracket here. So you just take your caliper and tuck it up here. You don't want to let it hang by the brake line. It's a bad thing, especially if you drop it and it slams in the brake line. I've seen that a couple times. Seen leaks develop from that. It's not a good thing. So just hang it up here. It stays on the strut pretty well by itself. You can see it's just hanging out right there. There, obviously here's your pads. Just pull them off. Duralast gold. It's high performance right there. So my car stops so well. And, want to make sure your pins slide well. Your slide pins. These are 14mm heads for the caliper torque member. Torque member to the spindle here are 19mm head bolts. And I use a brake bar. They are relatively tight. The procedure is identical on both sides, so I'm not going to bother showing both. But yeah, if the caliper starts, or the rotor starts coming off, it'll hang up on the torque member and make removing this bolt a little harder. Either of these bolts, actually. So just hold the rotor in place, pull these bolts out. Damn, it's greasy. Pull your torque member off. Yep. Set that aside. And the rotor, if you're lucky, just pulls right off. Holy shit. Huh. Yeah, the rear of this one isn't all that great. Some dirt, debris got in there probably. And yeah. This pad is all scored. Just like the rotor. So, we'll make sure, not that it'll really affect this one at all, but get all your grease and crap off of here. Like I said, brake parts cleaner. You can just spray it down. That works well. And get your new rotor. And before you install your new rotor, if you bought new ones, you want to spray those off as well. They come when they're shipped, or before they're shipped out from the manufacturer. They're covered in an oily type of coating, basically to prevent rust while they're in storage. So you want to, spray those off. Otherwise, you'll get some really nasty smell and some nice little smoke first couple of drives after you install them. Now putting the lug nuts on just kind of helps keep the rotor in place while you're dealing with the torque member, the caliper, all that fun stuff. So this is just to it helps you out. You don't have to deal with the rotor flopping around. It just needs to be finger tight on there, basically. So you go install your torque member and your greasy ass bolts. I'll probably get torque specs, probably add them to the video as full captions. Little dialogue boxes are in the sidebar. Really, torque spec is tight. Plenty tight, I believe is the what FSM says. Chances are, unless you weigh 500 pounds and you're hanging on the end of a bar, you're not going to break them. You're not going to strip the threads out. And it's probably plenty tight. So now, throw in your new pads. Some of them have shims integrated into the pad. These Duralast ones. These high performance braking pads. They're separate, you just kind of stick them on there. I like to put some anti-squeal lube in between the shim and the pad. You put it on the back of the pad where it's going to contact the piston. You can see we have a nice shiny area here. And the edge of the pad, these sliders here, these tabs, where it comes into here, comes into the little clips on the torque member. Let's go ahead and slide them in. Again, just want to keep away from getting a good amount of grease or anything on the pads, or any lube you use for all the. You don't want to lube all the metal to metal contact areas. Any lube you use, you do not want to get it on the pads, because that's obviously a bad thing. So now that's done. Clear your caliper down. And, it's insane. You're going to want to compress this piston in. I don't have any C-clamps. I keep on meaning to pick them up, but I just never do. What you can use if you're doing this at home, which you probably are, if you do any like carpentry work or around the house work, you probably got some wood clamps. You know, something to hold pieces in place while wood glue is drying or whatever. Those work really well. If they're, you know, you can put it up on top, put one end on the banjo bolt for the brake line and the other one right here. If you use an old pad right here, you know, helps even out the force a bit, which is nice. So basically, just compress that in. If you search on YouTube, I'm sure Expert Village has 1,000 fucking videos on it. Not a fan of Expert Village, not really at all. So yeah, you can press that in to fit your new brake pads. Obviously, I'm using the same old pads, so it doesn't really matter. Pad height didn't change, thickness. So after that's nice and in place, you get your 14mm head bolts. And so after you got that bolted back on, take your brake line, stick it back up to the bracket it goes in, find your clip, there it is, and stick it right back in place. I may need to hammer it in a little. And I forgot to mention, if your rotors do not just pop right off like mine did, there are two different ways you can get it off relatively easily. I prefer the BFH, and this is a tiny hammer, but you just want to hit it either along the side of the top head here, or you can hit it in between the studs. You just don't want to knock the stud out, because then you got to deal with that. Or there are two holes, two threaded holes. They are threaded for 10 by 1.25 bolts. Basically, any bolt in your car that's a 14mm head, it's going to be 10 by 1.25. Just throw it in there, and you want to tighten them down relatively evenly. You know, maybe one turn here, one turn here. Just get two bolts. Just back and forth. You don't want to get it really cocked off to an angle. But yeah, so replacing front brakes on your 4th gen Maxima.